I should have been afraid of the room I walked into, but fear came later. First, there was the sound of a monster reading a bedtime story. The Waverly Grand Hotel looked like the kind of place that had never known an unpaid bill, never heard a radiator knock through the night, never watched a child pretend not to be hungry so a teacher would not worry. Marble floors shone under chandeliers the size of small planets. Champagne glasses chimed softly in every direction. Men in dark suits laughed with their mouths and watched with their eyes. I stood near the registration table with my thrift store black dress, my borrowed heels pinching both feet, and a folder pressed against my chest that held the entire future of my classroom. 32 students. 12 outdated textbooks. 6 cracked tablets. 1 application for a grant that could keep our after-school program alive until summer. I kept telling myself that was why I was there. Not because I belonged. Not because anyone in that golden room would remember my name after the speeches ended. I was Claire Bennett, 4th grade teacher from Brooklyn, professional smiler, expert at making broken things last one more year. The woman at the desk told me the donor reception was down the east corridor, second door on the left. I thanked her, turned too quickly, and followed the wrong hallway. I did not know it then. I only knew the music faded behind me, replaced by quieter sounds. The hum of hidden vents. The soft squeak of my heels on polished stone. The distant patter of rain against tall windows. At the end of the corridor, one door stood open just enough for a line of warm light to spill across the carpet. I thought I heard a child cough. That stopped me. Not the kind of cough people ignored at galas. The small, tired kind my students made when they tried to convince me they were fine because they did not want to be sent home. I stepped closer and looked inside. The room was not a meeting room. It had been turned into something private and strange, half hospital, half nursery. A small boy slept in a narrow bed beside a quiet machine that blinked green in the dark. A stuffed rabbit rested under his arm. Beside him, in a black suit that looked sharper than any blade I had ever imagined, sat Alexander Hayes. I knew his face from whispers before I knew his name. The man people lowered their voices for. The man donors watched from across rooms without daring to approach. The man my principal had described as complicated money, which was the polite way adults talked about danger when they still wanted a check. He was supposed to be downstairs, surrounded by security and expensive smiles. Instead, he sat in a chair too small for him, one hand holding an old children's book, the other resting carefully near the boy's blanket without touching it. His voice was low. Gentle. Almost broken. And the little prince looked at the stars, he read, and knew he was not alone. I forgot to breathe. This was not how powerful men were supposed to look. Not tired at the edges. Not soft in the dark. Not like someone holding himself together because a sleeping child needed the room to feel safe. I must have shifted, because the floor gave the smallest creak beneath my heel. His head lifted. The story stopped. His eyes found me in the doorway, pale gray, calm, and terrifyingly awake. For 1 second, neither of us moved. The rain touched the windows like fingers. The boy slept on. Then Alexander closed the book with unbearable care and stood. He was taller than I expected, maybe 6'2", his shadow stretching across the carpet until it touched my shoes. "You are not supposed to be here," he said. My mouth went dry. I wanted to explain the hallway, the grant, the mistake, the child's cough, anything that would make me less of an intruder. But all I managed was a whisper. "I'm sorry." His gaze moved to the folder in my hands, then back to my face, reading me faster than I could protect myself. He did not raise his voice. He did not step too close. Somehow that made him more frightening. "How much did you see?" I looked past him at the sleeping boy, at the worn book, at the tenderness he had not hidden fast enough. And against every instinct that told me to lower my eyes, apologize again, and run back to the glittering safety of the gala, I answered the truth. Enough to know they are wrong about. You. For a moment, Alexander Hayes did not react at all. He simply watched me from across that quiet room, his face unreadable, the old storybook resting in one hand like evidence of a crime he had never meant anyone to witness. Downstairs, the gala kept breathing without us. Music rose faintly through the floor. Laughter drifted behind the walls. Rain traced silver lines down the windows, making the city beyond them blur into light and shadow. But in that room, everything felt suspended. The sleeping boy shifted under his blanket, and Alexander turned his head instantly, not with irritation, not with impatience, but with the alertness of someone who knew how fragile peace could be. That small movement told me more than any rumor ever had. He cared. He hated that he cared. And he was terrified someone might use it against him. You should leave, he said quietly. His voice was controlled, but there was something underneath it now, a warning wrapped around restraint. I nodded because that was the reasonable thing to do. Leave the room. Find the east corridor. Smile through the donor reception. Pretend I had not seen the most feared man in New York reading to a sick child with a tenderness that made my chest ache. My feet did not move. Is he your son? I asked before I could stop myself. Alexander's eyes sharpened. The air changed so quickly I felt it against my skin. No one word. Cold enough to freeze the question in my throat. He placed the book on the bedside table with careful precision, then stepped toward the door. Not toward me exactly, but close enough that I understood he was ending this. Behind him, the boy slept on, one small hand curled around the stuffed rabbit's ear. Then why are you here? I whispered. His gaze dropped to my folder again. My cheap folder. My grant forms. My whole desperate little mission clutched in both hands. Claire Bennett, he said. I felt my stomach drop. 4th grade. Public School 98. Brooklyn. My fingers tightened around the folder until the edges bent. How do you know that? Because everyone invited to this building tonight was reviewed before they walked through the front door. He said it like it was ordinary. Like knowing my workplace, my address, and maybe every mistake I had ever made was nothing more than good manners in his world. That is not an answer. Something almost like surprise crossed his face. Most people probably did not speak to him that way. Most people probably had better survival instincts. Mine had been ruined by years of standing between frightened children and adults who confused volume with authority. It is the only answer you need, he said. The door behind me opened without a sound. I turned and found 2 men in dark suits standing in the hallway. Neither touched me. Neither spoke. They did not have to. Their silence was a locked gate. My pulse beat hard in my ears. Alexander saw it. Of course he did. He seemed to see everything. You are safe, he said. I looked back at him, almost laughing because the sentence sounded impossible coming from him. Safe people do not block exits. His jaw tightened, but he lifted one hand. The men stepped back immediately. The hallway opened again. The gesture was small, but it carried more power than shouting ever could. Better, he asked. Not really. For the first time, his mouth almost moved toward a smile. It vanished before it became real. He walked past me into the hallway, and the men straightened like the building itself had been waiting for his permission to breathe. I followed because the alternative was standing alone beside a child I did not understand and a secret I could not unsee. We moved through the private corridor, away from the warm room and back toward the golden noise of the hotel. Every staff member lowered their eyes when Alexander passed. Every guest who glimpsed him from the ballroom entrance shifted aside before he reached them. He did not rush. He did not need to. The world made room for him. I had seen powerful people before. Principals. Donors. City officials with polished shoes and careful smiles. Alexander Hayes was different. His power did not ask to be noticed. It entered first and waited for everyone else to realize they were already obeying it. At the elevator, he stopped beside me without looking down. "What you saw tonight cannot leave this floor." My throat felt tight. "Because it would ruin your reputation?" This time, he did look at me. His eyes were pale gray and tired in a way no one downstairs would have believed. "No, Miss Bennett. Because in my world, mercy is a weakness people aim for." The elevator doors opened, spilling gold light across his black suit. I stepped inside with him because I had no idea what else to do. And as the doors slid shut, I realized something that scared me more than his name. I was no longer afraid of what Alexander Hayes might do to me. I was afraid of what he was trying so hard to protect. The elevator descended without music, without conversation, without any of the soft lies hotels usually use to make silence feel polite. Alexander stood beside me with his hands folded in front of him, still as stone, while the numbers above the doors glowed one floor at a time. 28. 27. 26. My reflection stared back at me from the polished brass wall. Pale face. Two wide eyes. A teacher in borrowed heels standing beside the kind of man parents warned their daughters about in whispers. I wanted to ask where we were going. I wanted to demand he let me return to the gala, collect my folder, thank the donors, and leave before this night became something I could never explain to anyone. But the words stayed trapped behind my ribs because a worse truth had already settled there. I did not want to leave. Not yet. Not until I understood why the most dangerous man in the city had a hospital room hidden inside a luxury hotel. The elevator stopped on the 12th floor. Alexander did not move. Then the doors opened onto a hallway that looked nothing like the rest of the Waverly Grand. No chandeliers. No gold mirrors. No waiters carrying silver trays. Just soft white lights, quiet carpet, and a reception desk where a woman in navy scrubs looked up, saw Alexander, and immediately stood. "Mr. Hayes," she said, her voice careful but not afraid. "Room 3 is stable. Dr. Lang says the new medication is working well." Alexander gave one small nod. "And room 5? She is asking for pancakes." Something changed in his face. Not enough for anyone else to notice, maybe. But I was watching too closely now. One corner of his mouth softened, then disappeared. "Then give her pancakes." The nurse smiled like that answer was exactly what she expected. I stood frozen beside him as understanding came slowly, then all at once. This was not one room. This was an entire floor. Behind the closed doors were children. Sick children. Quiet children. Children whose parents sat in chairs too small for adults, holding paper coffee cups and trying to look brave. I saw a little girl through a window, bald under a pink knit hat, coloring stars onto construction paper. I saw a teenage boy asleep with headphones over his ears and a comic book open on his chest. I saw a mother crying silently while a doctor spoke to her with both hands wrapped around hers. My throat tightened so suddenly it hurt. "What is this place?" I asked. Alexander looked down the hallway, not at me. "A temporary care wing." "In a hotel?" "In a building I own." Of course he owned it. Of course he could turn a floor of marble and million-dollar views into something no one downstairs would ever be allowed to see. "Why hide it?" I asked. He finally looked at me. "Because some people donate to be admired. I do not." That should have sounded noble. From him, it sounded like a locked door. The nurse approached with a clipboard and lowered her voice. "The Bennett grant packet is ready for review whenever you want it sent downstairs." My heart stumbled. Bennett. My name. My school. My folder was still pressed against my chest, but he already knew. Alexander held out his hand, and the nurse gave him a cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. He passed it to me without ceremony. Your after-school program will be funded for 3 years. Tablets, books, meals, transportation, and winter coats. I stared at the envelope. The hallway tilted slightly. You cannot just do that. I can. You do not even know my students. His gaze moved past me to the little girl coloring stars. I know enough. My fingers shook around the envelope. I thought of Jamal wearing sneakers with split soles in February. Of Madison hiding granola bars in her backpack for her little brother. Of 32 children who deserved more than my best intentions and a box of donated crayons. Why? I whispered. Alexander was silent long enough for the question to become heavier than the hallway itself. Then he turned away, but not before I saw the shadow cross his face. Because once, someone gave a child one more chance, he said. And I have spent the rest of my life paying that debt. The words stayed with me all the way back to the elevator. Once, someone gave a child one more chance. He said it like a confession, not a favor. Like every clean white hallway, every quiet machine, every sleeping child behind those doors had been built from a memory he could not survive and could not let go. I wanted to ask him who the child had been. I wanted to ask why his voice had changed when he said it. But Alexander Hayes had already closed again, his face calm, his shoulders straight, the secret floor disappearing behind us as the elevator doors slid shut. We returned to the glittering belly of the Waverly Grand, where the gala still pretended the world was simple. Music. Champagne. Applause. A woman in diamonds laughed too loudly near the ballroom entrance. A man with a silver watch shook hands with someone he probably hated. No one looked at me and saw that I was holding an envelope heavy enough to change 32 lives. No one looked at Alexander and saw the hallway full of children above their heads. Maybe that was what money did best. It hid pain under beautiful lighting. Alexander walked me through the crowd without touching me. People parted anyway. I felt the space open around us, felt the whispers rise and fall like cold air. He did not acknowledge any of it. He simply moved forward, and the room obeyed. Outside, the rain had turned Madison Avenue into a river of headlights. Black cars waited along the curb, their windows dark, their engines running with a low, patient hum. A man opened the rear door of the first car before Alexander reached it. I stopped on the hotel steps. The night air was sharp and wet against my face. I can take a cab, I said. Alexander looked at the street, then at my borrowed heels, then at me. No one word. No argument inside it. My spine stiffened. I was not asking permission. And I was not offering control. His voice stayed even, but his eyes moved once toward the hotel entrance, then to the street beyond the awning. You saw something tonight that belongs to people who cannot protect themselves. That makes you important in ways you do not understand yet. A chill slipped under my coat. Are you threatening me? He turned fully then, and for the first time since the hidden floor, I saw something close to frustration break through his restraint. I am warning you. The rain tapped the awning above us like nervous fingers. There is a difference? Yes. His gaze held mine. A threat is about fear. A warning is about survival. I wanted to dismiss him. I wanted to say that men like him always made danger sound noble when they were the ones carrying it into the room. But then I remembered the boy asleep under the blanket. The girl asking for pancakes. The mother crying into a paper cup. Mercy is a weakness people aim for. His sentence came back to me so clearly I almost heard it in the rain. Why me? I asked. Why tell me any of this? Alexander was quiet for a long second. A drop of rain slid from his dark hair to the collar of his coat. He looked less like a king in that moment and more like a man standing outside a door he had locked from the inside years ago. Because you looked at them like they were children, he said. Not secrets. Not charity. Not a story to sell. My throat tightened. That should not have moved me. Not from him. Not from a man surrounded by shadows and black cars and silence that bent around him. But it did. He opened the car door himself this time. "Let me take you home, Miss Bennett. After that, forget the 12th floor exists." I looked at the warm leather seats, then back at the hotel shining behind us. I thought of my school. My students. The envelope in my hands. The children upstairs who would still be there after the chandeliers went dark. "And if I cannot forget?" I asked. Alexander's face did not change, but his eyes did. "Just slightly. Just enough. Then be careful who you remember it for." I stepped into the car, and as he sat beside me, leaving a careful distance between us, I realized the most dangerous thing he had done all night was not showing me his power. It was showing me the part of himself he was desperate to keep hidden. By the time Alexander's car reached my apartment in Brooklyn, the rain had softened into a mist that turned every streetlight into a halo. He did not ask to come upstairs. He did not make some dramatic promise. He only waited until I stepped onto the curb, then lowered the window just enough for his voice to reach me through the wet night. "Lock your door, Claire." It was the first time he used my first name. I hated that I noticed. I hated even more that the sound of it followed me up 3 flights of stairs, past the peeling paint, past Mrs. Delgado's old welcome mat, past the radiator knocking inside my tiny apartment like a nervous heart. I locked the door. Then I checked it twice. The envelope from the Waverly Grand sat on my kitchen table until dawn, untouched beneath the yellow light. I should have opened it right away. I should have celebrated, cried, called Principal Harris, made a list of books and winter coats and tablets that actually worked. Instead, I stood over it in my bare feet, still wearing the black dress, still smelling rain and leather seats and the faint trace of Alexander's cologne on the air around me. 3 years of funding. Meals. Transportation. Winter coats. He had given my students a future with the same calm voice he used to order an elevator. That should have been the end of it. Gratitude. Relief. Distance. But when I finally broke the dark blue wax seal, a smaller card slid out with the official letter. Thick white paper. Embossed silver lettering. The Lily Hayes Foundation. My hand went cold. Not because I knew the name. Because some part of me did. It moved through my body before it reached my mind. Lily. A small voice in the dark. Blonde hair stuck to tear-wet cheeks. A hand squeezing mine so tightly it hurt. I blinked, and my kitchen disappeared for half a second. I was small again. Maybe 7. Maybe younger. There was rain then too, harder than this, pounding against windows in a house that did not feel like home. I remembered hiding under a staircase with another girl pressed beside me. She smelled like vanilla shampoo and crayons. She had whispered, "Do not cry. I will keep you quiet." Then the memory snapped shut so fast it left me dizzy. I gripped the edge of the table until my breathing steadied. Foster care had left holes in me. Everyone said that was normal. Trauma did not always keep records. It left smells, sounds, little broken pieces that surfaced at strange times, then sank again before you could name them. But Lily Hayes was not a smell or a sound. It was a name. At school the next morning, I moved through my classroom like a ghost trying to pretend she had slept. The children were loud in the ordinary way children are loud when the world has not asked them to be careful yet. Pencil sharpeners grinding. Sneakers squeaking. Someone arguing about a missing blue marker. I loved every bit of it. Principal Harris cried when I showed her the funding letter. Real tears. Right there beside the copy machine that always jammed on Mondays. "Claire, this is a miracle," she whispered. I looked down at the card again. The Lily Hayes Foundation shimmered under the fluorescent lights. A miracle. Or a message. At lunch, while my students ate pizza squares and orange slices in the cafeteria, I sat alone at my desk and typed the name into my old laptop. My fingers hesitated before pressing enter. The search results appeared slowly. Charity events. Pediatric care grants. Anonymous donations. No founder listed. No interviews. No smiling board members posing with oversized checks. Just work done quietly, year after year, in places where no cameras had been invited. Then I found one archived article from 15 years ago. The headline was vague, careful, old enough to feel buried on purpose. Prominent Hayes family mourns daughter Lily, age 9. My throat closed. There was a photograph beneath it, grainy but clear. A teenage Alexander stood beside a little blonde girl holding a stuffed rabbit. His face was younger, softer, almost unrecognizable except for the eyes. Lily smiled at the camera like she trusted the world. But that was not what made the room tilt around me. At the edge of the photograph, half hidden behind Lily's shoulder, stood another little girl with brown hair, wide eyes, and a blue sweater I suddenly remembered wearing. Me. I stared at the photograph until the cafeteria noise faded into a distant hum. The girl at the edge of the frame could not be me. She was too small, too still, too familiar in a way that made my skin prickle. Her brown hair was cut unevenly above her shoulders. Her blue sweater had a tiny white flower stitched near the collar. I remembered that flower. Not clearly. Not like a normal memory. More like a hand reaching up from deep water. I remembered touching it when I was scared. I remembered Lily touching it too, pressing one finger to the little stitched petals and whispering that flowers knew how to grow again after storms. My breath caught so sharply that Mrs. Patel from second grade looked over from the staff table. "Claire, are you all right?" I closed the laptop too fast. "Yes. Just tired." It was a terrible lie, and she was kind enough not to challenge it. The rest of the school day moved around me while I stayed trapped inside that old picture. I taught fractions. I tied a shoelace. I broke up an argument about whose turn it was to feed the class goldfish. I smiled when children handed me crumpled worksheets and asked if they did a good job. But underneath every ordinary moment, Lily Hayes whispered from a place in my mind I had sealed off years ago. "Do not cry. I will keep you quiet." By 3:15, when the last bus pulled away from the curb, my hands were shaking. I sat alone in my classroom with the lights half off and searched again. This time, I did not look for the foundation. I looked for the date on the article. April 17th. 15 years ago. My stomach turned cold. I had been placed with the Reeves family 2 weeks after that date. My adoption records were locked in a plastic folder at the bottom of my closet. I had never liked reading them. Too many blank spaces. Too many words adults used when they did not want to write the truth. Neglect. Emergency placement. Unclear family history. Child unable to provide consistent account. I had spent years telling myself not. Remembering was a mercy. That afternoon, it felt like theft. I left school after sunset with the photograph saved on my phone and the Lily Hayes card tucked inside my coat pocket. Brooklyn was wet and gray, the sidewalks shining under passing headlights. Every sound felt sharpened. A bus braking at the corner. A dog barking behind a fence. My own keys clinking too loudly in my hand. When I reached my building, a black car was parked across the street. Same quiet shape. Same dark windows. My heart stepped hard against my ribs. The rear window lowered. Alexander sat inside, his face shadowed by the soft interior light. "Get in," he said. Not harshly. Not loudly. But with the tired certainty of a man who already knew I would not walk away. I should have been angry. Maybe I was. But anger had to fight its way through fear, confusion, and the strange ache of seeing his sister smile from my past. I crossed the street, opened the door, and slipped into the back seat beside him. The car smelled like leather, rain, and something faintly clean, like cedar. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. He looked at my coat pocket. "You found the name." It was not a question. My fingers closed around the card. Lily Hayes. His face changed so slightly that most people would have missed it. I did not. The name hurt him. It passed through him like a blade made of memory, silent and invisible. "Do not search her again," he said. "Why?" "Because the past is not kind. The past has my face in it." That made him turn. Slowly. Completely. I pulled out my phone, opened the photograph, and held it toward him. The light from the screen touched his eyes first, then the rest of his face. I watched the moment he saw Lily. I watched the moment he saw me behind her. His breathing stopped. The city moved outside the windows, traffic sliding past in streaks of red and white, but Alexander did not move at all. The man who made rooms fall silent, the man who gave orders without raising his voice, the man everyone feared, sat beside me with an old photograph in his hand and looked suddenly, impossibly lost. "That girl," I whispered. "Was she me?" His jaw tightened. His eyes stayed on the screen. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than I had ever heard it. "I spent 15 years looking for the child my sister saved." My throat burned. "Alexander." He looked at me then, and there was no power in his face. Only grief. "And she has been standing in front of me the whole time." The car did not move for a long time. It sat against the curb while Brooklyn carried on around us, indifferent and ordinary. A delivery bike rattled past. Someone laughed outside the corner deli. Rainwater slipped down the window in thin silver lines, bending the streetlights until they looked like stars melting against the glass. Inside the car, Alexander held my phone like it weighed more than metal and light. His thumb hovered near Lily's face but never touched the screen. "Tell me what happened," I said. The words came out softer than I intended, almost childlike. He closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them again, the grief was still there, but controlled now, locked behind the discipline that seemed to hold his entire body together. "You were in emergency placement," he said. "A temporary foster home in Queens. My family was funding several children quietly back then. Lily hated that it had to be quiet. She thought kindness should have windows." A broken little sound almost left him, but he swallowed it. "She was 9 years old, and she believed every child could be rescued if adults stopped making excuses." The name Lily pressed against something inside me, and the memory answered with warmth first. A yellow blanket. Crayons on a kitchen table. A girl with bright hair drawing flowers on the backs of old envelopes. "She drew stars," I whispered. Alexander looked at me. "She drew them everywhere." My chest tightened. "I remember her." His face shifted, not with surprise, but with pain so deep it looked quiet. "There was a night," he continued. "A storm. A mistake made by men who thought power meant owning every life around them. My father had enemies. I was 17. Old enough to understand danger, young enough to believe I could keep it away from her." He looked out the window, but I knew he was not seeing Brooklyn. "Lily found you hiding in the pantry. After the house staff panicked. You were crying, but she put her hand over your mouth and told you to breathe through your nose. Then she took you under the back staircase where the walls were thick." My body remembered before my mind did. The smell of dust. The scratch of carpet against my knees. Lily's fingers laced through mine. Her whisper so close to my ear. "Do not cry. I will keep you quiet." I covered my mouth with one hand. "She saved me." Alexander nodded once. His jaw worked like the words were cutting him on the way out. Yes. And I could not finish. He did not make me. She did not come back upstairs. The sentence landed without detail, without image, without anything cruel, and somehow it hurt more because of what he refused to say. He protected even that memory from ugliness. The girl in the photograph smiled on my phone screen, forever 9 years old, forever brave, forever standing between my life and the night that had erased her from his. I did not know, I whispered. Nobody knew where you went afterward, Alexander said. The records were sealed. Names changed. Agencies stopped answering. I looked for years. At first because I needed to know her last act had meant something. Later because I realized that if I could not find you, I could still build something for children like you. The 12th floor flashed through my mind. The sleeping boy. The girl asking for pancakes. The mothers holding coffee cups like prayers. Not charity. Not reputation. A memorial with a heartbeat. That is why you created the foundation, I said. That is why you hide it. His eyes met mine, pale and devastated. I hide it because anything I love becomes a target. I hide it because Lily loved loudly, and the world punished her for it. I hide it because I learned too young that mercy survives only when cruel men do not know where to find it. I should have felt afraid. I should have heard that sentence and remembered every warning attached to his name. Instead, I saw the 17-year-old boy he had been, searching sealed records, building hospital rooms, paying invisible debts to a sister who would never grow older. My heart hurt with a tenderness I had no permission to feel. Alexander, I said, and his name came out like an apology. He turned away first, as if my compassion was harder to face than fear. You should hate me for the world I come from. I looked at Lily's photograph, then at the man who had spent 15 years trying to make her kindness bigger than her loss. No, I whispered. I think she would have loved you for what you did with it. Alexander did not answer me right away. The car filled with the soft sound of rain and the muted pulse of traffic moving past us in red and white streaks. He looked at the photograph one last time, then handed my phone back with the care of someone returning something breakable. There is a place I need to show you, he said. I should have asked where. I should have remembered that ordinary women did not get into cars with men like him and let the city disappear behind tinted windows. But ordinary had ended the moment Lily Hayes smiled at me from an old newspaper photograph. So I nodded. The driver pulled away from the curb, and Brooklyn blurred around us, brownstones and corner stores giving way to quieter streets, then to a small stone chapel tucked behind iron gates near an old cemetery in Queens. It was not grand. No marble steps. No golden lights. Just weathered stone, ivy climbing one wall, and a single lamp glowing above the door like it had been waiting for us for 15 years. Alexander stepped out first and opened my door himself. The rain had eased to a mist, cold enough to wake every nerve in my hands. He walked ahead of me through the gate, not like a man entering holy ground, but like someone returning to the room where his heart had been left behind. Inside, the chapel smelled like old wood, candle wax, and rain-soaked coats. Rows of empty pews faced a simple altar. On the left wall, beneath a stained glass window, stood a small table covered with white flowers. At the center was a framed photograph of Lily. Not the newspaper picture. A happier one. She was laughing, head tilted back, a gap between her front teeth, her whole face bright with the kind of joy children have before the world teaches them caution. My knees almost gave out. She looks exactly how I remember her, I whispered. Alexander stood beside me, hands in the pockets of his black coat, shoulders rigid. I come here every year on her birthday. His voice was quiet. And on the day she left. I stepped closer to the table. There were drawings there too, preserved behind glass. Stars. Flowers. A crooked rabbit. Childish, colorful, alive. My fingers hovered over one drawing without touching it. A blue flower with uneven petals. My breath caught. She drew this for me. Alexander turned sharply. You remember that? I closed my eyes, and the chapel dissolved. For a second, I was small again, sitting at a kitchen table with crayons spread between us. Lily pushed the blue crayon into my hand and told me every flower needed a sky above it. I could hear her voice now. Thin. Bright. Brave. When I opened my eyes, tears had blurred the candlelight. She told me flowers grow again after storms. Alexander looked away, but not before I saw his face break. Not dramatically. Not loudly. Just a crack through the mask, a tremor in the mouth, a man losing a battle he had fought in silence for half his life. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the card from the foundation. The silver letters caught the light. You kept her alive, I said. He shook his head once. No. I built rooms. Paid doctors. Moved money through names no one could trace. That is not the same thing. It is to the children upstairs. His jaw tightened. I am not good, Claire. I did not say you were. That made him look at me. His eyes were raw, almost startled. I took one careful step closer, leaving enough space for him to choose. I think good is too simple for people who have survived complicated things. The chapel was silent around us. Somewhere above, rain slid softly along the roof. Alexander looked at Lily's photograph, then back at me. She saved you, he said, as if he still could not believe the words were real. Yes. My voice shook, but I did not look away. And because she saved me, you saved all of them. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he did not look powerful. He looked 17. Lost. Waiting for someone to tell him his sister had not. Vanished into nothing. I placed the foundation card beside Lily's flowers. Her kindness did not end that night, I whispered. It found you. Then it found me again. Alexander opened his eyes, and something inside them changed. Not healed. Not yet. But less alone. And in that quiet chapel, surrounded by candles, rain, and a little girl's drawings, I understood the truth I could no longer run from. I was not falling for the darkness everyone feared. I was falling for the man who had spent his life hiding light inside it. The chapel stayed quiet after my confession, as if even the rain had leaned closer to hear what Alexander would do with it. He did not step toward me. He did not touch my hand. He only looked at me with those pale gray eyes, and for the first time since I had met him, there was no calculation in them. No command. No wall. Just a man standing in front of the only living piece of his sister's last kindness, trying to understand how grief could return as a person. You should not say that, he whispered. His voice sounded rough, like it had traveled a long way through the dark before reaching me. Say what? That you are falling. I looked at Lily's photograph, at the flowers, at the little blue drawing she had made for a frightened child who became me. Why? Alexander's jaw tightened. Because I am not a safe place to land. The honesty of it hurt more than any lie would have. He was not promising me gardens or morning coffee or a life without shadows. He was offering the truth with both hands empty. I had spent most of my life fearing secrets because mine had been taken from me before I was old enough to name them. But his secret had not trapped me. It had opened a locked room in both of us. Maybe I am not asking you to be safe, I said. Maybe I am asking you to be real. Something moved through his face then. Pain. Wonder. Resistance. He looked down at the candles until their small flames reflected in his eyes. Real men like me ruin gentle things. I shook my head. Lily was gentle. His breath caught. I took one step closer, still careful, still giving him space to turn away if he needed. 2. and she was the bravest person in that house. For a moment, I thought he might break completely. Instead, he lowered his head, and the silence around us softened. Outside, a car passed on the wet road beyond the chapel gates. Somewhere in the walls, old Wood settled with a quiet sigh. I built the foundation because I could not save her, he said. No, I answered, my voice trembling but certain. You built it because she saved me, and some part of you never stopped believing that saving one child mattered. His eyes lifted to mine. That was when I finally understood the full shape of his secret. It was not the hidden hospital floor. It was not the money or the doctors or the quiet envelopes sent to schools that no one else remembered. It was not even Lily. His real secret was hope. Buried deep. Guarded hard. Disguised as control because hope had once cost him everything. I reached for the old storybook resting on the chapel table, the same one I had seen him read beside the sleeping boy. Its cover was worn soft at the corners. Inside the front page, in purple crayon, a child had written, "To Alex, so you remember the stars. Love, Lily." I traced the words with my eyes and smiled through tears. She knew you, I whispered. Even then. Alexander stared at the inscription like he had read it 1,000 times and only now understood it. Then he gave the smallest nod. Not forgiveness. Not peace. But the beginning of both. When he drove me home that night, the city looked different through the window. Not brighter. Not clean. Just less empty. He walked me to my building and stopped beneath the broken awning while rain ticked softly on the metal above us. Claire, he said, and my name sounded less like a warning now. More like a prayer he did not know how to say. I turned on the first step. He looked at me as if he was memorizing the distance between us. I will never ask you to love the darkness. I held the foundation card against my heart. I do not. His face stilled. I looked at him, at the man the city feared, the brother Lily loved, the boy who had turned grief into shelter, and I finally told him the truth. I love the light you kept alive inside it.